Okay, welcome everyone. It's my great pleasure here in World Unity Week to be with one of the pioneers in the consciousness movement and someone who for decades has been pushing forward our understanding of the connection between science and spirituality and our essential unity as human beings on this planet. I'm with the one and only Dr. Deepak Chopra. Thank you so much, Deepak, for joining us today.
Thank you, Ben. It's a privilege.
So we're here in World Unity Week, Deepak, which is an incredible, we would say unprecedented coming together of so many different organizations from many different fields, including the interfaith field, the consciousness space, environmental activism, social justice, youth groups, indigenous groups, so many different groups who have come to the same realization. And that realization is while the burning fire of their passion areas is strong, the realization is that we can't affect transformation at the scale that we need while we each stay in our siloed areas. And that it's really only by coming together across these different passion areas and across these different areas of activism, a broad spectrum, that we really can create the mass and the mobilization that we need to move the needle and impact world transformation. So the question we're asking everyone inside World Unity Week, and I get to ask you, which is a great privilege, the question is, what is needed to mobilize a world unity movement? Deepak, what would you say to that?
Ben, I agree that right now there's almost a critical mass of people from different constituencies asking for a new worldview. And I also believe that social activism can trigger transformation. But in my experience, it hasn't. I grew up in the 60s when I thought everything was going to change. There was the feminist movement, an uprising at that moment. There was the anti-Vietnam War movement. There was Greenpeace. There was the peace movement. And there was the movement about climate change. It was beginning. The conversation of the environment was beginning. So as a medical student, I thought, wow, in 10 years, we're going to have a different world. Well, this was almost now 60 years ago. And actually, I'm saying that we are back to where we were, and at this moment, perhaps even worse. So what happened to all the activism? What happened to all the good intentions? And so I believe a fundamental shift can only come if we both understand intellectually what existence is, what life is, but then also experientially that existence is entangled with what you're calling unity consciousness, which is a very good phrase, but it means a lot more than what people think. So if you give me a little permission right now, I'll tell you where the fatal flaw is in what we are trying to accomplish. And this is the Achilles heel. And this is that we think of existence only in terms of human existence. And we don't understand that human existence is entangled with all existence. By existence, I mean life. So even the biological organism that we call a human being is the product of entangled information that is the expression of the entangled genetic information of the planet. The entangled genetic information of the planet right now is being called the microbiome. But most people, when they think of the microbiome, they think of the microbiome in the human body. The microbiome is the basis of all life on this planet, which means bacteria, fungi, viruses, human genes, and all genes of plants, of bacteria, of microorganisms, including corona genes, which have been around, by the way, for 55 million years. Homo sapiens has been around only for 200,000 years. But the entanglement of genetic information, which is the planetary microbiome, gives rise to all existence, all existence. We call that existence the biosphere, because the biosphere is not only outside ourselves, as the air, as the stars, as the galaxies, as the sun, as the moon, because we need the light of the sun and we need planetary movements in the way they are structured right now for life to evolve on this planet. But life on this planet evolves through the expression of genetic information, which is entangled. And when that biosphere, which is out there as the earth, the sky, the atmosphere, and everything, including what you breathe, the air is your breath, the trees are your lungs. If you didn't breathe, they wouldn't breathe. If trees didn't breathe, you wouldn't breathe. You put an animal in a vacuum, it dies. You put a plant in a vacuum, it dies. You put them two together, they live. So we know from all the great philosophical traditions that life or existence is inseparable. It's not just connected, it's inseparable. It's one activity. And of course, from wisdom traditions and experiences in meditative practices, we actually experience that. We experience what is called unity consciousness, and we recognize that all suffering in the world comes from the socially induced hallucination of the fragmented, separate mind, which is basically a hallucination. It doesn't exist. And yet all our activity in human civilization has been from, in fact, what we call civilization, which is, I would say, not a good word, because we are hardly living in a civilized world right now. We're living in a world with eco-destruction, extinction of species, poison in the food chain, extinction, risking extinction ourselves, mechanized death, nuclear weapons, biological warfare, hacking of democracies, mechanized death. All of these things are created by the human fragmented mind that thinks existence is all about humans. But human existence is entangled with all existence and all life. And we have scientific proof for that. When the biosphere is stressed, the biosphere out there and the biosphere in here are the same, they're entangled. Your body is made of the same elements and forces as the rest of the universe. Your body and your biological organism is made of the same elements and forces as the rest of the universe. And when this biosphere is stressed, it's inflamed, then genetic mutations occur in order for the biosphere to repair itself. Any scientist will tell you that there are only few mutations that happen for which we don't know the cause. In general, all mutations, whether it's cancer or heart disease or whatever, only 5% of mutations are genetically inherited and are what we call fully penetrant. They guarantee the disease. So if somebody has a BRCA gene, for example, breast cancer, that guarantees breast cancer. But only 5% of genetic mutations that cause illness, all illness, are fully penetrant, and we don't know why those mutations occur. Almost 95% of mutations are a result of inflammation or toxicity or stress of the biosphere, of the ecology of existence. So when that entangled genome of the planet is inflamed right now as a result of all the things we're doing, then COVID-19 is what we get. I mean, I'm not putting a guilt trip on this. I personally feel the reason you're calling it COVID-19 is that's the latest mutation. And what it is saying is, humans, please go back to your homes so we can fix ourselves. The life existence can reset itself. And we're seeing that. We now, for the first time, recognize that it is possible to reverse climate change. The birds are singing, the bees are back, fish are returning to dead lakes, People can breathe in Bangalore. You can see the Himalayas for 400 miles away. Fish are there back in the canals of Venice. And the greatest thing is that bees, which were thought to be going extinct, which are responsible for 90% of the nutrition on this planet, they're coming back, which means life is celebrating. Existence is celebrating. So should we. We should celebrate existence, because if we think only in terms of human existence, we might as well go to the bar, get drunk, and prepare for extinction. If we are ready to do that, then let things be as they are. But if we want to resurrect life on this planet, we have no choice than to understand both intellectually and experientially that there is one life, there is one existence that differentiates itself into innumerable expressions. So the human body-mind is one expression of the entangled microbiome. And there's a saying amongst evolutionary biologists, not all of them, but some of them who understand what's going on, a permanently victorious species risks its own extinction. So right now, we have become that permanently victorious species out of fear and greed. That's it. We only think in terms of what's good for me and mine, not recognizing that me and mine is entangled with all of life, with all of existence. At this moment, we have no choice. Either we go in the direction of unity consciousness using every methodology, science, philosophy, any system of thought, technology. Just the fact that we're using this technology right now means we are inseparably connected. We're sharing cognitive and perceptual space, even though we call it cyberspace. But the cyberspace, actually behind the cyberspace is the space of consciousness. And that consciousness is one, period. It differentiates into innumerable expressions of itself, which we call mind, body, and universe. But mind, body, and universe are the differentiated aspect of a single reality. And if we don't recognize that at every level of our being, then, sorry, we're screwed.
Thank you, Deepak. I think that's a very wholesome answer. And just to reflect back that, yeah, absolutely, there, I would say most groups have realized what you're speaking, that we're talking about unity with all of life. This is not just intercultural or interfaith. It's got to be all of life, and not just all of life, even all of the elements, the water and the fire and the other elements. And so do you see inspiration also in the indigenous traditions here, Deepak, with the sense of their holistic view that you're talking about, that we are dependent on creation for our own existence and therefore cannot, by definition, be superior to it or control it without destroying ourselves? This is part of the message. And do you see also in that return, there's a strong now return to go back to understanding the indigenous wisdom, which was crushed by the Enlightenment and by the rationality of the European colonization. And now there's a longing to really go back and reclaim that wisdom. Do you see hope in that movement?
I see hope only in that movement. And I think we are all the people who are descendants of quote unquote white colonialism, all of them. I include myself. I'm an indigenous person myself, right? All indigenous people were originally very close and considered themselves the expression of the inseparability of all existence, and they celebrated it all the time. The rituals, the understanding that actually took us to the source of everything that we know, the source of thought, the source of perception, the source of emotions, the source of all knowing can only come when you recognize that you're an expression of that one life. Now, through an accident of nature, which is very peculiar actually to me, most people don't recognize that all of us are descendants of Africa, all of us. It doesn't matter where you are. The indigenous people in Australia, in Latin America, the Nordic people, about a couple of million years ago, there was a migration of hominids, not Homo sapiens, of hominids from Africa, first into Asia, and then 1 million years ago into Europe. So all the white guys have, below the surface of their skin, they are descendants
African. Yeah.
of Africa, okay? So they go to Africa, they enslave the descendants of their ancestors. They put them into servitude, and they destroy their dignity, totally destroy their dignity. They call them heathens, they call them barbarians, when in fact they are the barbarians. They are the ones that are coming with guns, and they are the ones under the name of king, queen, wearing beautiful uniforms with medals, committing rape, murder, pillage, and then getting knighted by the king or queen. I have two ancestors, just so you know. One was knighted by the British because he discovered a drug which was based on, by the way, on an indigenous plant called Rauwolfia serpentina, and it was a treatment for hypertension. So, but discovered from indigenous sources. So my ancestor was knighted by the British. Another ancestor was a tribal chief, and they wanted his land, and he said no, so they killed him. He got shot. He actually committed suicide. His saddle and his sword is now housed in the Tower of London as the spoils of war. And it's, this is the great British Empire. Sorry, I have this history, which, one side of my ancestors, they look at the British and they say, wow, they gave us all this understanding and culture and science and technology. And actually they look up to the British. And when my father became a member of the Royal College of Physicians, one side of my ancestors celebrated. Another side of my ancestors said, these are murderers. Okay, so now we have to face that history. We can't do anything about that history. It's there. But if we do not face the history, we will not understand why Black Lives Matter or why indigenous people matter. We have to face that history, even without resentment and grievances. I have no resentment or grievances. We have to recognize that there was injustice. We have to recognize that today's situation in the world is a result of that injustice. And then we have to say, what is our new story? What is the new story? Forget now, we recognize the past, we know the present. What's the new story? And if the new story does not include social justice, economic justice, racial justice, climate change, authentic nutrition, caring for our planet, therefore climate change, caring for our health and well-being, not for the pharmaceutical industry, caring for each other, caring for life. If we don't create that story, we're done.
Thank you, Deepak. It's a very urgent message. So what I'm hearing you say is that in order to really foster this transformational movement, social movements aren't enough. We need a radical revolution in consciousness or evolution in consciousness, back to and forward in this understanding of who we are in creation, with creation, as creation.
When not only are social movements not enough, interfaith dialogue is not enough, intercultural dialogue is not enough. The experience of who we are as humans and as life. Otherwise, right now, our humanity is incomplete, fragmented, distorted, and sick.
And Deepak, it sounds also like you're calling for, or at least suggesting, a global truth and reconciliation process, which looks at all of the wounds and all of the hurts and all of the deep injustices that happened over our history in order to bring it to the surface and heal. We can't have unity without healing. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, but I still say, Ben, it's not enough. I think what we need right now is a global awakening. And not just dialogue and talk. Okay, so we have to be the change we want to see in the world. not depend on gangsters who call themselves leaders of the world. Every leader of the world, I can think of one or two who are exceptions. You know, maybe the leader of New Zealand or the Ireland or whatever, but every other leader, in my mind, is a gangster, is a thug, is the mafia person who sold their soul. And so you can't trust leaders. You can't trust, I believe you cannot trust any organization, period. I only feel there's a collective awakening that involves three things. And this comes from my tradition, okay? So I'm going to use my traditional words, but I'm going to say what they mean. So, you know, my tradition says, whether you get to the Vedanta or my indigenous tradition or Buddhist tradition, it says take refuge in the Buddha, which means take refuge in higher consciousness, not the name Buddha. Take refuge in higher consciousness. Take refuge in the Sangha, which is the community, which we are right now. This is a community in the Sangha. So take refuge in the Buddha, higher consciousness. Take refuge in the Sangha, and then take refuge in service to humanity and to life. There are three other words for this: seva, which means service, sangha, community, and simran, which is spiritual remembrance of who we are, not based on race or religion or ethnicity, who we are as life. So those are the three components of transformation. What is happening right now is we can incorporate those three components in online and offline communities who want to be the change they want to see in the world. And that's the only solution. Everything else can come in, all this dialogue, interfaith, cultural, science can come in, but you need a critical mass, and you can pull it off with what you're doing right now, with this movement that you're creating, to create global online and offline communities that help each other, that share best practices in these areas: climate change, social justice, economic justice, healthy food, well-being, conscious communication, the getting rid of mechanized death, getting rid of the whole metaphor of war. Right now, even our metaphors are metaphors of violence. War on drugs, war on poverty, war on
Corona.
justice. What a stupid metaphor. We don't need metaphors of violence. We need creative emergence. And then science, there's a social science for emergence as well. It says when you have shared vision, which I hope we have right now with you,
yes,
where you have shared vision, where you have emotional and social and spiritual bonding, where you complement each other's strengths, where you have maximum diversity, where you have open, transparent feedback and open systems. When you incubate with this longing for healing, then emergence will happen, period. And it will not happen because of governments or organizations or religions. It will happen because you have seen yourself clearly.
Amen. Amen. Satu, Satu, Satu. Deepak, we actually have that in common, the Thai Buddhist tradition. I know you ordained, and one thing you may not know is we run a program in Chiang Mai for many years called Monk for a Month, and I got to experience that myself. And it's a beautiful, deep. Thank you so much. I also want to mention that you've got a new book, Total Meditation, coming out on September 22nd, which happens to be part of our Peace Weekend, which is the next step, and in fact, the culmination of this whole 10-year journey since 2012.
Right now, the two books I'm focusing on, first is my current book, which is called Meta-Human, Going Beyond the Conditioned Mind. But Total Meditation is how to live from the source rather than from the fragmented mind. So it's going in this direction. We need to live from the source rather than from an ideological framework. You know, because that's what we do. We live through our ideological frameworks instead of living from the experience of who we are at the most fundamental level of existence.
And you also have a 21-day meditation that's starting right about now as well. So people can go.
It's a 21-day meditation based on how to renew body, mind, and spirit. And you can check out Chopra.com, and it's free of charge, and we want everyone to participate.
Deepak, I want to thank you from the bottom of my being for being with us here and bringing your leadership and
My
wisdom
privilege. My
to
privilege.
World Unity Week.
I'm happy to serve if you want me to.
Thank you so much.